remaining crew of a decommissioned space station come face to face with horrors from beyond our universe. In the Burning Dark, a chilling space opera creepypasta. That's the book I'm reviewing on this episode of SFF180. Thank you everybody for joining me. TMW here as always. Space opera and horror is a genre mashup that you far more frequently see taking place in Hollywood movies, much more frequently than in literary SF. But acclaimed author Adam Christopher has jumped into the nightmarish fray with both feet in his new novel, The Burning Dark. Set in the 30th century at a time when the human race is faring poorly in a war against an alien machine intelligence called the Spiders, who have a habit of building 10,000-kilometer-long spacecraft that eat entire planets, the story takes place aboard a remote space station in the process of being decommissioned that orbits a very bizarre purple technetium star. Captain Abraham Idaho Cleveland, a war hero who must have the most American name ever, is assigned to the station as part of his retirement duty to oversee its decommissioning. Now, when he arrives there, he finds a pretty hostile reception, particularly on the part of the remaining Marines who are stationed there, all of whom believe that he has falsified his war record. Indeed, when Idaho checks military archives in order to prove himself, he finds that any record of his exploits has been entirely redacted. Other things are very strange about the station, including the fact that its commandant somehow has managed to leave the station between the departure of the previous transport and the one that has just dropped Idaho off. Taking the advice of the provost marshal, who is acting as commandant of the station, to pretty much stay out of everybody's way and not raise any hackles, Idaho retreats to his cabin and, to while away the time, builds himself a portable space radio receiver in order to pick up random broadcasts from around the galaxy. It's like a hobby of his. Indeed, that's a really interesting element of this novel, is that all of Adam Christopher's approach here favors a kind of retro tech to his science fiction. You don't have any of this Gibsonian or singularitarian mind-machine interface going on. No, it's all, greasy elbows and tinkering with gadgets and putting stuff together, and you have this future where people enjoy being intergalactic ham radio operators for all intents and purposes. In fact, the one machine intelligence in the story is the story's secondary villain, hinting that Christopher thinks that maybe the melding of mind and machine is something where we ought to tread carefully. Anyway, Idaho soon finds that his little receiver is picking up strange interference from illegal deep subspace frequencies, and soon this interference resolves itself into a distinct signal, an SOS from a stranded astronaut that may be 1,000 years old. Before you can say Ridley Scott, characters all over the station are hearing voices, seeing apparitions, sometimes just plain disappearing without trace, and in some cases, certain characters, it's very obvious, they know more than they're telling, and there is more to them than meets the eye. Now, the events in this novel brought to my mind, anyway, similar events in Peter F. Hamilton's Night's Dawn trilogy. But I think the obvious point of comparison you're going to be hearing people make when they discuss this book will be the 1997 film Event Horizon. And it's a fair cop. Indeed, it can be said that the book shares a lot of the movie's vices as well as its virtues. Its virtues include a string of extremely effective early scenes in which a deeply eerie and palpable looming sense of dread is evoked that really brings out some goosebumps. But ultimately, its vices do take hold in a bombastic, far more action-oriented climax that throws all subtlety to the winds, raises a few more questions than it resolves, and quite frankly feels more suited to a graphic novel or an anime than an actual novel. It's not a poor ending, it's just that I have always found this kind of horror to be much more chilling and effective when it leaves as much to my imagination as possible. But to be fair, very little horror I have found has managed to successfully draw that balance between resolving all of the necessary plot points that it needs to, and still leaving as much up to the audience to imagine what might be lurking in those dark shadows than simply just telling us. But while The Burning Dark may be, in the end, a bit more impressive for what it attempts than what it actually achieves, what it achieves is still a darkly memorable story that will no doubt leave some of you sleeping with the light on and the radio off. And that, dear readers, is all I have time for on this episode of SFF180. Remember, the most important thing, these are reviews. You will not always agree with me, but if you enjoyed watching, please like, share, and sub, the usual litany. And thank you very much for recent channel growth. And check the About section below for relevant links. And until I see you next time, happy reading.